But like you have this attitude where like because I had a time like my beginning of music was touring and tour managing.
Yeah.
And like I feel it. Like I know that energy and it's so funny, but it's also like it can be taxing to have to be the responsible one or the manager. And like you still to this day, the way you tell the stories, like your general demeanor, like you don't have that like heavy, significant stress. You're kind of just like, yeah, it was fun.
No, you know what it was? I will say, when Blink broke up the very first time, um, and Angel started, Rick and I started managing Angels. That time period, I think, was a very humbling time in the sense that you realize that like the ladder on the way up is the same on the way down, and it was literally a matter of a day where the phones are ringing off the hook. People are calling you, you're not calling them. Whatever you wanted would happen.
Yeah.
It was that kind of era. And then the minute that it shifted with Angels, it became this like phone stopped ringing. You're calling
Whoa.
constantly, and people that you always, I think, thought were like, oh, these are our friends, like meaning executives and people they always worked with, it'd be like, oh, taking a couple days to get a call back and be like, oh yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? So it was a very, I think, humbling time to kind of go up and have that happen and realize that you're kind of like, yo, I think it was very early on that I realized like you're only as popular as the biggest band you manage.
Whoa.
Um, and I think it just created this thing of just like, be nice to people regardless. You know what I mean? Because you never know where they're going to be at any point of their career. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
could be like annoyed with some random dude, and then next thing you know, he's the reason that this is happening or this or that. And I
Yeah.
think just more so in sense of just like with no agenda. But I'd say that was like a very big period where it shifted from Blink to Angels and Airwaves, where you realize like, okay, it's like, roll the sleeves back up and get in the trenches and really, really work. And I think that was at the time where it was, I think, more so for me personally, where it became more encompassing, where I started tour managing as well. I started production managing because everything with Tom at the time, it was such a precious thing. And
Yeah.
obviously it was his own kind of financial stake. So everything, everything was so heightened or whatever. So it was a matter of learning every single craft. So I would say at that time, that was really where I kind of shifted to really do 10 more hats per se. You know what I mean?
Whoa, crazy. So you
Um,
weren't like during the Blink days, y'all had like your whole road crew and TMs and it was
yeah, we
just you
had
and
we had
Rick
road
like
crew, we had people, we would go out to like shows, you know what I mean? It was very like, you pop into a New York show, you go to a London show. But yeah, I mean, it was like you had your go-to tour manager, production manager,
yeah.
and
So
I
for
think also
Blink
too,
days, you weren't really like that was
yeah,
never like your official title. Like you'd go check on them, but you were
yeah.
management, getting it
Yeah,
all
you
done.
would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much like management situation. And I think at that time too, I think back to what you're saying with the humbling thing. I mean, you have to understand, like, I was very young. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like at that point, I mean, I remember spending my 21st birthday at the Blink Pop Disaster New York show. Like that was we were on the plane and we thought it'd be like cool to like drink my first legal beer. Like it was me, Rick, and Cheetah at the time. Um, so I was very young at that time where, um, I think to come in and just get some sort of respect to get stuff done,
Yeah.
it was so it was never like a party to me per se,
Yeah.
it was always like, yeah, and I think also too, I never, I knew that I had no clue at the beginning. So it was always a thing that I used to always latch on to certain people that I enjoyed. And I
Yeah.
would be like, okay, what do I like that they do? You know what I mean?
Oh,
What do I like that
cool.
they would do? And I would just be like, okay, great. I want to try to mimic that, you know? So we had like a tour manager, production manager, Eric Furman, and he was like, I really enjoyed like working with him. I was like, okay, great. Like, how does he handle situations? How does he interact with people? You know, certain people from record label executives. How was that? You know, that was a lot of the early stages where and I remember Rick was very like, yo, mouth shut, eyes and ears open. I just was like trying to take it all in of like, okay, well, how do I want to be perceived by people that I'm working with, you know? So
Dude,
that was very much the kind of tone I would say at that time. Um,
that's incredible though. Like talk
yeah.
about that's a college to go to right there. Holy shit.
I mean, dude, where were you when I was trying to convince that to my parents?
Yeah. Send him this podcast episode. Be like, look, see, Andrew says so.
Yeah, I know,
Years
right?
later. No, that's crazy though. Like, really, that's insane. What an amazing way to learn. And that's so
Yeah.
cool. Like, I guess like Rick, but really everyone, like to take that chance on you and to empower you and believe in you, but also for you not to get the ego and to keep your head down and to quietly observe and learn. Like,
Yeah.
wow. And to happen to experience the magic of Enema
Yeah.
and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and just like that era to
Yeah.
be around all of that. Oh my God.
It's it's funny. I mean, looking back now and talking to a lot of people that were fans of that. I mean, it's more so just now is like I guess more just a personal like feeling or success of just like okay, I was, you know, I had something to do with, you know, that whole kind of time. You know, it's never like I can never claim anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um because like I said, it was always very much like very group driven in terms of everybody bringing something to the table, you know. But that was the great thing is they were always open to hearing ideas. Like I remember when we were going in to record the self-titled record, and we were throwing around the ideas of like let's just put like a live stream in the studio. You know, it's like nobody had done that before.
No, it's what,
Um,
2001?
yeah, we had no clue how we were doing it. Next thing you know, it's like we're renting this lady's house, having to like bring in T1 lines to make sure that there was like enough stuff. You know, so it's just like that was I guess the fun times where it was just like, you know, if you thought up anything and people thought it was cool, like you would get it done, you
Yeah.
know?
Dude, holy
Um,
shit. What a
yeah,
college of life and opportunity to learn. So then
yeah,
it gets to the Angels days, and that's like where you were starting to take on more hands-on roles, and it was a
yeah.
different kind of set of stakes.
Yeah, it was definitely different tone for sure, you know?
Mhm.
But I would say that those were definitely the years of where I really truly like I remember settling my very first show. You know what I
Whoa.
mean? And it's funny because when you look back, you know, advancing a tour, dealing with international logistics, immigration, cartage, understanding weight and how an actual show happens, I'd say that was really when I was kind of like, okay, and you start to be able to apply it to like future stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you would really understand because you know for the Blink years, there's just very like you call your tour manager, what's the quote? Cool, boom, 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 like you know, line item. You know, and I think that was like at least for me, I feel growing. It was that time period where firsthand I was able to like understand. Like I remember the very first time, like we were filming something for Angels and Airwaves, and I was like talking to Doug, Tom's guitar tech, and I was like, "Yo, why can't I hear anything?" He's like, "Oh, we have no sound on stage," and I was like, "What does that mean?" Like, I'm looking at 90 cabinets, you know, that weigh 1 billion pounds that take up half a truck, and he's like, "Oh, it's you know just for looks," and I was like, "Why are we then flying that in cartage?" You know, so it's like you start to like redefine like the business of like, okay, like how do you know what I mean? It's like certain things like that where, you know, I think really doing all aspects of it really started to kind of, I think, hone in things that I started like finding enjoyable about the job, you
Yeah,
know?
I'm a big believer of that. Like to be the best version of an executive, you have to know how to actually do the jobs
Oh,
that
yeah.
you oversee. So
Yeah.
like you being there hands on and starting to experience that on a different level, like it definitely
Yeah.
like shapes you to then like really analyze it and understand it.
Yeah, and I think, especially when you're out on tour, I mean, it's definitely a community and a family vibe, and it's
Yeah.
without a doubt, the band can't execute without the crew. And
Yeah.
sometimes, you're just looking at it at the beginning of like, okay, well, the drivable miles is this, but you're not factoring in the moment, a storm happening, technical difficulties, this drive, 4 on, 1 off, 5 on, you're not factoring all this up until the point of like, okay, how do I keep the crew dudes going to like get the show up and running so the guys have something to kind of work with. So I'd say those were like the really kind of like informative years for me.
That's
Um,
crazy. And how many years was that?
oh God, that was basically, I mean, it was definitely 2 full Angel cycles where it was We Don't Need a Whisper, I Empire.
Mhm.
And then that was kind of like the plane crash, which then kind of brought the Blink reunion kind of back around. So it was those
Whoa.
2 records.
Damn. And then the plane crash was like a pretty fucking crazy thing for everyone involved, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what it was? It was very I think at that point in it, there'd been one Angels record. We're well into another cycle. Um, it wasn't, I think right when Blink broke up, everybody was kind of like, okay, they'll get back together in a few months, kind of thing. And I think at that point, it was kind of, I think long enough time gone by, and Angels was getting somewhat of, success in that, right? Where they're kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, like there was nothing, there was no talks or anything of it. And I remember we were actually in North Carolina filming One Tree Hill.
Whoa.
And we were actually on the way to the airport, like when literally we're boarding a flight, and on the news is like the breaking Travis was in a plane crash. And we were flying to Boston because we were getting ready to start the Weezer tour. And that tour was that was the very kind of like rekindling where, I remember like we landed in Boston, and that night, Tom came in my room. We just listened to Blink music for the entire night. And I think it was the first time like ever you just kind of listened to it. And he was just kind of like, what? This is just all so simple. Holy shit. Like, how has Blink become such a big impact? And I think like when you're in it, and even for me, like at the time, like when you're in the bubble, you don't really have the foresight to realize like truly how massive certain records were for like an entire like generation, you know?
Yeah.
So that was that. I will say that. I mean, that was a very, I guess, special night to really just kind of sit there and kind of go, whoa,
Yeah.
in terms of looking back and all that. Um,
And
but
it's got to
yeah,
be the craziest perspective, right? Like to
it's crazy. You know what? The thing that I always, I think, admired, at least with Tom, was I think nowadays, like you can see because of social media, there's this, I'm not going to say an arrogance with artists, but there's this like kind of brag or kind of like, yeah, my shit's hot kind of thing. And
yeah.
I will say, I mean, he truly, I think, which it also baffles me as well, but many conversations where I think he truly didn't understand how Blink was as big as it was. And I
Mhm.
think because you get that where, like I was saying, I think the Blink years and everything that it was, I mean, they were just living exactly what it was. Like
Yeah.
they lived and breathed that music, the style, the lifestyle, everything. And so I think when you start to really dive in and dissect exactly what it is, and then with Angels realize the amount of hard work to actually just get your first gold record,
Mhm.
because it actually is like meaningful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you realize, so when you can sit there and you go, God, like I could just write 10 all the small things right now. It's just super like boom, boom, boom. Like this was my equation. Um, I think it was a moment where you don't realize how the impact that it has on people. At least
Yeah.
Tom, I know he, which I still appreciate, I think even now, like when we're out and people approach, I think he still is very just kind of like, whoa, wow, thank you, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
it just hits him differently, like he didn't
yeah,
expect
you
it.
know, it was a very genuine thing, I think, back in the day, you know?
It's so crazy.
Where
I don't know
really it was just a matter
why.
of like, we want to sell out our local hometown show and heard on the radio, you know?
Yeah. I don't know
Um,
why, but there's one thing you said to me in all of that that just feels like it like encompasses it all. Where it's you're on a private jet and the catering is sombreros. Like I just feel like
yeah,
that says it all. I don't know what, but like
yeah.
that's it's you're giving them all these crazy opportunities, but it's still the same people. Like it's just
Oh
like,
yeah,
yeah, fuck up some sombreros. Sounds good.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it was, you know, it's funny to this day, like, dude, I know the Taco Bell behind the pageant in St. Louis. Like, I know so many just like, yeah, it was never, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, there's definitely enjoyable, finer things in life where you're like, oh, you know what I mean? But yeah, it was never this like, you know, the few times that it was like a private involved, it was never, you know, we realized and we're going to like overindulge. I mean, it was just like, oh, what do we want? Okay, cool. You know,
Yeah.
I think we
That's
also, I think it was like we got PF Chang's too. I think it was like PF Chang's and sombreros,
tight,
you
tight,
know?
tight. Yeah,
Yeah.
PF Chang's is a step above.
Yeah. So,
That's insane. So, oh my God, this is such a hard like podcast for me because I want to ask you every question and hear every story and every detail, but like it can't be a podcast forever. And I don't know, maybe we come back and do like a follow-up episode or something. But
yeah.
I do want to get to another very important part of your story where
Yeah.
you had the most insane college of life, Blink 182 days, everything like with that, like everything with like just all of that, right? Rick DeVoe
Yeah.
and that era. Then you go to Angels and you experience it on a firsthand level. And then ultimately, like you get off of the road, or I mean, you really always kind of came from the management side, but now
Yeah.
like your career, your job, like you are an artist manager and you
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
work with artists outside of that. So what was that like then kind of doing your own thing? Cause what's the name of the company that you're with now?
So I work with Pat Magnarella now.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was kind of, so once Blink got back together, um, you know, we did several tours. We did the Neighborhoods record, Dogs Eating Dog. It was getting to a point where, how do I say this? I think for me, I was going, there's a lot of things happening. Personally, for me, I had just gotten divorced. I was married very briefly, and I was having to basically rebuild my personal life, you know? And so that was happening, you know, the Blink dynamic, um, you know, I think it wasn't, I think, how do I say this? Obviously, this is all my personal opinion. It just, I think it just was, a lot of certain things that I think should have been addressed and discussed never really were. It was kind of like, oh, we're men. We don't need to talk about emotions. We're good. Yeah, cool. You know what I mean? And then it was kind of like, okay. And so I think that there was just this like kind of aha moment with me where I'm sitting here rebuilding my personal life. And I think it was the first time ever where I was able to reflect that I kind of was just kind of like, okay, how did I get here? You know, like I've been doing this for 15 years with Rick, traveled all around the world, been a part of, you know, big records, amazing moments. You know, a lot of the relationships, it very much is like a high school girlfriend where it's just so like in it, it is just live or die. It's all right now kind of thing. And, you know, the big aspect I think for me was I was always a fan first and foremost, you
Yeah.
know? I always started out as a Blink fan that was able to cross that threshold and transition and be a part of it. And I think, there was just, for me personally, there was just a lot of stuff, when you see stuff on the behind the curtain, I think the second go around, like, was really where you realize, like, okay, this is a business, and this
Yeah.
is not just, you know, dudes that, play in a garage that want to travel around the world, and you like Descendants, I like burritos. Cool. We have a lot in common. You know what I mean? I think that was when I really was kind of like, it all kind of came full circle. And I think with where I was at and just everything with Tom, it was one of those, I just didn't feel like it was serving me anymore.
Yeah.
I just wasn't happy,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Let alone, I didn't know what I could do, because the only
That
other job I
was
had
what you
was
knew.
movie theater. You know what I mean?
That's such a crazy place in life to be, and that must be
Yeah.
so, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but I can only imagine how scary that could have been of, like, obviously,
Oh,
Blink-182 is fucking
yeah.
huge.
Well,
So
and
the
also too, I
idea.
think a big thing too was it was my identity.
Yeah.
Like, people always associated me to either those Blink years, to Tom, to Rick. Like, that was my identity. And like, talking to Rick, and I talked to a couple key friends that used to work at the record label or agent during those years, and since have kind of gone and do other things. And I, started to just kind of throw around some ideas. And I was like, hey, like, I'm thinking about doing this. I don't know. I had no clue where to start. Again, like,
Yeah.
I don't have a resume. I was just like, for lack of better, I was like, I kind of fell into this. And I've been doing this for 15 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I'm good at it. I don't know. And
That's
so I
so
remember I was
nuts.
talking to an agent friend that works with Blink, and she had like a really great talk with me, and sort of like boost my confidence. So, like, you're great at this. This is like, because like, I was just like, I don't know, like, I'm not very, like, I'm the best at this. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
talked to her, and she goes, listen, listen, she goes, you should reach out to Pat, and at least start there. And I was like, you're right. That's like a good first move, because Pat actually lives in San Diego. Because in
Oh,
my head, I was also
cool.
just like, well, do I need to move to LA? Do I need to go to New York? Like, if I want to stay in music, like, no one's in San
Yeah.
Diego. And so I'd kind of been toying around with it. And I was like, you know what? Like, finally, I was like, I'm just going to email Pat, and, just had a great relationship with him. Obviously, we worked together during the Pop Disaster Tour. And he moved to San Diego, would run into him every now and then, try to surf. So I reached out to him, just sent an email. I was like, hey, man, please keep this between us. I'm thinking about leaving, just want a fresh new start, not bringing anything. Just wanted to see if there's a conversation to be had. Let me know. And he emailed me within 5 minutes. He goes, Chris, great to hear from you. I'm in Australia. I get back on Thursday. Let's meet at my office on Friday. And I was like, okay.
Damn.
And again, I went in not really knowing, like, do I want to work with him? It was merely just, I respected him as a manager. And I think I was still just trying to get my head around everything at the time.
Yeah.
And
Can I ask a
I met
question?
with him.
I don't wanna mess up the flow, but I
Oh,
just,
yeah, yeah.
so obviously, like, he's so well respected and has done so much, but then, like, I could only imagine, as much as you love Rick and Rick was a mentor, for your own mental sanity and for your own sake, like, it maybe didn't feel like you could even stay on the side of, like, doing things with Rick because it was all so closely tied to Blink and you were
Yeah.
trying to.
I think it was also at a time too where there was definitely just, I think, a divide amongst a lot of people, you
Yeah.
know. I think he was understanding the same sort of sentiment where I was at.
Yeah.
He obviously being further along in his career, family, kids. I'm sitting here going, God, how old was I at the time? 32, just divorced, single now, no kids, have to get a new place, like going through divorce, living at home with my parents because, you can't enter a contract for a minute, So it was, I think it was just, he was very kind of, I think, and also too, like Rick always wanted what was best for me in a very unselfish way to himself, So
That's
it was a
cool.
matter of like, if an opportunity presented itself, he would be the first one that would be like the number one champion for it,
What a fucking guy. That's sick. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was just curious of that. So then
Yeah.
you meet with Pat.
Yeah. So I met with Pat and like I said, went in and didn't really, it wasn't like, again, I was going in looking for a job. It was merely just like, hey, conversation. Maybe it was more like therapy of just like, oh, this is what I'm going through. This is kind of what I want to do. And honest to God, I had an offer that night and he was like, hey, I'd love for you to come work with me. I think you're great. A lot of, people that, we both work with that are well respected in the industry have great things to say about you. And I think you would be a great asset to the team. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. And he goes, when do you want to start? And I was like, Monday. And he was like, okay, great. Cool. Well, yeah, see you Monday. And he goes, well, I'm going to South by Southwest. Do you want to book a flight? Like come out on Tuesday? I was like, okay. And at that time it was funny. This was like another big transition and I'll get into it in a minute, but, it was, I think that was another pivotal learning point in my career as well with working with Pat, where I'm now have been for 7 years. Where when you just have one band, maybe two, obviously, in the height of Blink, it was like Blink-182, Newfound Glory. We did some stuff with Isley, obviously did the Transplants. We did Boxcar Racer. We did all the kind of like side projects during the first era.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. We did some stuff with some pro surfers, but it was always very boutique. You know what I mean? It was never a matter of like, let's sign all these bands and bring it in. I remember there was a minute where it was like, dude, should we do Jimmy Eat World? But it was like, Rick was, the thing I respect about Rick was just very simple. It was like, this is it. This is the focus, but yeah, it was that moment. So I kind of was like, okay, yeah, let's go. And so I remember I told Rick and he was just very super supportive, but I think also was just kind of like, how do we just like lose you? You know what I mean? And I think it was at a time too, where, I called our agent and it was that kind of time where it's like, hey, don't, I had then, didn't tell Tom. It was one of those where I think me exiting was, there's a lot of stuff kind of happening where, I don't know. It was just like a very, like I said, it was a weird time, I think, for a lot of people,
Yeah. It's like, I feel that too, like being a fan of Blink during that time. And like, I don't even think that it's like a bad blood or beef thing. Like, it's just like
No.
everyone's growing up, everything's changing. And it just felt like that all, like literally as a fan, I feel like you could
Yeah.
perceive it.
I
And
mean, it very much was that, I think once things kind of just took off, I mean, it was like literally like that. And here, all of a sudden you're like, here we are, and it was a matter of like marriages, divorces, kids coming, and it's like, you start having your priority be a family. And then next thing you know, you're on the road X amount of years and you're kind of like, God, I want to be home. I want to enjoy. And you're kind of
yeah, it's like,
yeah, I get it. But when you have such a big machine like that, it is like, again, like I said, this is coming, this opportunity. And you're kind of like, well, I would be dumb to pass that up. So we'd be like, okay, let's do this, and it's just, I think it's the first time where you kind of realize the strain. I think people have this perception of being in a band in the music industry, but, for a lot of it, you realize the strain that it has where you're on the road day in and day out. And it's like that moment of the show that you're just getting off work, you're meeting up with your friends, you're going, it's like, there's 12 hours of work before it. There's promo, there's, a lull, you do the show, you get in a bus, you drive overnight. And then it's like, yo, it was a bumpy drive. I didn't sleep last
Nice.
night. I start getting sick. It's like, and then everybody just wants. Well, there's more press. There's that, and you're just kind of like, give me a minute, you know?
Yeah,
And you're trying to
dude.
juggle, try to like,
Yeah, and
okay,
it's like,
how do you keep everybody happy?
dude, totally, and it's like
You
that's
know?
how could you hold that against anyone? It's like at
You
that
know?
age, everyone's just growing up so fast. Like you're forced to grow up on the road. You're forced to process all of these emotions, everything, while you're keeping this band going. And a band that's branded around being like funny and goofy. It's like you're
Yeah.
growing up, you're dealing with all this life, and it's like people know like the Mark, Tom, and Travis show, and it's like how can you I can only imagine how it's like, how
Yeah.
do you evolve that band and everybody? So I don't know, it's
Well, it's
crazy.
funny too. I think, we're seeing it a lot nowadays, but I think the early start of it is, people create a narrative of what they think it is, and that's what they want.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, go back to Dude Ranch. And you're just kind of like, it's the same old every time a band puts a record out. There's like, oh, go back to this, go back to that. It's just this constant battle with, I think, people's demands and perceptions of it. And you're just sitting here going like,
Totally. So the like
oh,
the whole you switching was kind of you having that moment of just realizing like I need to prioritize myself and I need to
yeah.
take the second to be like what's going to make me happy and like not just say
Yeah.
yes to
And I
every
mean, dude, don't get
opportunity.
me wrong. I mean, there was definitely a period of several months. At first I remember a lot of people were like, you're crazy, you're leaving, what? And there's self-doubt of like, am I good at what I do? Do I know what I'm doing? Can I break something? Can I have some sort of success? Is there ever going to be success on that level? How do I manage my own expectation? I mean, there was a time where it was crazy, but I will say when you're out of that bubble, it was very empowering of like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
um, I remember the first day that I started working at Pat's. I remember um, I had like a 45-minute conversation with Mark, and it was like the most amazing conversation I had in years of just on a personal level of like, dude, I'm super happy for you, like blah, 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 catching up. And that was, I think, amazing because especially like where I kind of came from, I was like, yo, I was always kind of his guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whoa.
Um, whenever he'd be on tour, I would stay at his house and watch his dogs. It was like that kind of thing. And then obviously there was a flip. So it was kind of, I think when I look back now, 7 years, it's like I feel like it's a great progression, and it's been an amazing thing to be able to kind of continue doing stuff with Pat, other bands. But I would say it's now a great thing to be able to, when you've worked with a band of that level at that success, you only have a certain idea of how things are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nice to go into like a brand new baby band with that kind of tone. You know what I mean? I think a
Yeah.
lot of other managers who haven't had that opportunity, you only kind of work in this scale. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, so I would say that's definitely something where it's nice to kind of, when you understand once the stars align and things click, you understand, um, I guess, the motion of it,
Yeah,
you
like
know?
now that you've experienced all these different levels, like that you were just in this incredible magic moment, but didn't know anything else. So that just
Yeah.
became the normal. Then you had your like in it, in the trenches, Angels and Airwaves era, kind of like realizing a different perspective of it. And then
Yeah.
this shift, and now you're working with different artists and it's not that boutique vibe. Like now is when you have the perfect perspective of all the angles and you can look at it and understand all
Yeah.
that.
I think you also reassess certain like victory points too. You know what I mean? I think there was definitely moments along the way where I was kind of like, what am I doing? I remember my 35th birthday I spent in London with a band, and they were playing to 15 people.
Whoa.
And I was like, wow, okay.
Whoa.
But in 2 years later, they were selling out a 1,500 cap, and you're kind of like, okay, this is exciting. You know what I mean? Um,
What's your
and I think
roster now?
What's that? So I do, right now I do a band called Floor. It's
Yep.
on Fuel by Ramen.
Which is awesome because Ryan Soroka books them, who is also on the
Correct.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I do a band called Double Camp. And obviously now in COVID, things have obviously changed a lot. So leaning in on a lot more stuff, like, you know, at the company and teams and helping out stuff. We have a label, NC Records. So we're putting some releases out on that. So I'm kind of helping head up that aspect of it. A couple things in the works, obviously TBD, you know?
That's funny that even
yeah.
now it's not just like the black and white answer of this and that. Like it feels like that same, like you're just so good at doing whatever is needed. It feels of like, this is all going.
I think I've always come from an area where I don't mind doing the work.
Yeah.
You know?
Damn.
And I enjoy it, you know, and also too, the industry that is today is way different than what the industry was. You know, I remember getting on the plane and flying to meet with Walmart and Best Buy and Target. And those were the days where it was like, you know, end caps and physical CDs and all that kind of stuff. You know, now, you know, it's talking to Allison Hagendorf at Spotify. You know, it's changed so much. And obviously now with COVID, I mean, things are changing and the industry's changing, you know, it's constantly changing. And I think the minute that you claim to be perfect at this or that, I think it's embarrassing to try to claim, because I've always, even now, I always claim, I was like, I don't have the best ideas, you know? There's way other people that are way better at stuff than me. But I think at the end of the day, it's a matter of acknowledging that and empowering the people that actually are best for that in their position and allow them to actually perform and just incentivize them. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it all comes down to just being a fan, you know? If you're in the music, into the music, then, you know, it doesn't feel like a job. So,
dude, like, it's just, you're blowing my mind right now, because it's
hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, it's everything. It's the way that I've always felt it should be. Like, you are reaffirming, like, because you've been in the game longer than I have. Like, I was just a kid skateboarding, listening to Enema of the State. When Enema of the State was out, I was the kid that didn't know that there was a job in music. I was just like, oh, this is cool. You put it in your CD player and it's awesome. And like, you don't think about it. And that's always like, that was my beginning, was just my friends started a band and started touring.
Yeah.
And I was a fan. I liked it. I thought they were doing cool things and I wanted to be a part of it. And it's crazy. That is the whole point of this podcast. This is the whole point of everything, is like to hear stories from people who now have made it and like have the experience and can stand on solid ground and say, I was here, and did this. And like, what an honor it is to talk to you and have experienced an era of music that I idolized. And through it all, it's just this mentality of be a fan of the music and be willing to do the work and like keep your head down and learn. And you never know. And you always have to evolve with it. And it's like these lessons that you feel are no-brainer basic things, I feel can be lost in certain people you talk to, and it becomes this ego, and it becomes the like, oh, if it weren't for me, it wouldn't have happened, whatever. And it's like, I don't want to hear that story. I want to talk to people like you and inspire even more people to just be a fan of music and to show up for the things they believe in. So every word of what you're saying, I'm just like,
I mean, it really is that simple. I mean, you know, everybody's got to start from somewhere. You know what I mean? And you know, it's funny, throughout the years, you know, I was very active, like at the time of like when the Yahoo groups was starting and online was a thing. Obviously I was like the one that was like posting on the Blink-182 websites, updates and this and that. And also just seeing a lot of fans at shows, people would be like, hey, dude, I'm a big fan. And they would always ask me, and there's like, what do I need to do? Kind of like where I was going to Rick, you know? I was just like, dude,
what do I put on the line
major in?
for,
You know, and for so long, I just kind of was like, I don't know. I let a dude into a movie theater for free, saw Rick at a show, and now everything I owe is to those guys, you know? But you look at it and I've started to kind of like let people know of like, okay, well, is there a local band or your friend's band that you love, that you're passionate about, that's good? Like, get involved on that level. You know what I mean? Like, you sort of have to kind of start making your own noise. Obviously there's now a lot of great opportunities with internships, and there's now like actual major classes that you can major in, which is great.
Yeah.
I wish to God I had a class to understand what, Music 101 was. My class was Rick being like, I'm going surfing, answer the phone, throw you in it. Hey, here's the record deal contract. Read it. I had no clue what royalties were. I didn't understand how it was. I mean, I didn't understand. I remember settling my very first Angel show. Like, I understood the concepts of it all and this, but to actually go through line item and doing this and this with the promoter, I remember I was in Tucson, like building an Excel settlement grid, because I was like, okay, how does my mind work? I need to understand it. Okay, cool. Here are the ticket prices. This is what was sold. Here are the costs, and going through it all and then fine tuning it. I didn't understand that, like, I mean, obviously now there was that, but there was never that situation. But I was always down to ask questions,
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing too, where I think people need to like sort of take a step back and not, I guess, claim to know everything. Like, to this day, I still like call and I'd be like, hey, like, how do you do that? Like, is this the right approach?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. At the end of the day, it's just like, work hard and be nice to people.
Dude,
and be a fan of it,
I was going to say, everything you just explained there, like, I feel like the conversation that we're having in this podcast, like, podcast as a format will one day either be antiquated or totally different. Like, everything will always be changing. But I think the timeless lesson in your story, and I think that the thing that will always be true, is being a fan and being passionate and making your own noise. Like you said, like, technology is allowing us to learn and find data and information way better than we ever did. But I don't think it's ever just going to be handed to you. And I think you're always going to need those letting that person into the movie theater moments, or being a fan of whatever it is. Like, that, I think, is always there, and making your own noise, right? Like, it doesn't even matter what it is.
I think it also just takes a certain, you can't teach somebody it, but it's a matter of like, do you have the foresight to understand and recognize in that moment that you need to take charge and create your own destiny, or are you trying to have it be given to you?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm still figuring it out, like, I've been doing it for 21 years. And at the end of the day, I still kind of like have these moments where I sit back and I go, shit, I still get to travel around the world and go to shows.
And as a fan, that you did it. Like, that's what it is. That's what it's about.
It's trust me, it is definitely not lost on me where, it's funny. It's, having that aspect, I've lost that fan feeling, and so what I try to do, it's like when I go to shows, I try to like find somebody in the crowd that is like just losing their mind, going apeshit, having that kind of like moment. And I guess the second best feeling is just being like, okay, like, I'm stoked that she has that. She'll never know who I am. But like, my fan aspect now is getting off on the fact that I was able to like have some part in making this happen.
Dude, you know what I mean? So deeply relate to that. Like, just seeing that your profession and that what you put your time and your heart and soul into is positively affecting somebody, and like they're feeling those feelings that you had at those first shows. You're just like, yes, that is all worth it. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, cause that's really what keeps you going. You know what I mean? At least for me, it's never about a paycheck. It's merely about the fact that I get to work with great people. And I think as you get older, you start to just go, okay, I only want to work with really tight, awesome, amazing people, and kind of like what you were saying earlier, it's, you grasp onto people like Farber that connect really amazing people, what I
Yeah.
mean? That are kind of like-minded. And I think that's important, and I think especially in an industry that it's so competitive, I look at it in the sense now where I've only ever worked in rock music, you know what I mean? And I think even though rock is so important and powerful and big on a global scale, it's kind of like this dying breed, when it comes to streaming and all these situations. And I think it's important a lot of times to really try to also just support friends and bands that are also doing stuff that help push the needle forward for you as well. You know what I mean?
Dude.
Yeah, I don't know where I was coming with some sort of
like you said that so well.
process with that. I'm just like, part of me is like in my head, part of my brain is like, yo, you are talking too much. Shut up.
No,
and the other
this
part
is your
like, wait,
episode.
I've got this idea.
I'm like on the edge of my seat. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, keep going. Yes, more. Like it's crazy.
What?
But I love even what you said about rock. Like I just had a guest on, Zach Carper, who's in that band Fiddler. And we had this incredible conversation about how he's like, yeah, cool. My band is known as like rock band, but he's like, again, like fan of music. And he's like, I'm here to push boundaries. I'm here to embrace the future. I'm here to work with the people that inspire me. And that doesn't need a title or whatever. And it's like these conversations, people like you, people like him, people like Farber, it's like that is what gives me hope in the music industry, where it's like, oh, like it's a bunch of misfits that just love something, that are down to embrace it and to evolve it and to welcome that change. And it's just so refreshing and exciting to have conversations like this. So like,
yeah, it's nice. Like when I mean, Zach's amazing and crazy talented. I love when people bring it back to just being a fan of music.
Yeah.
Not the like, what's the look, the vibe, how's the Instagram gonna look? Like I need to be there. Like it's literally, I tell bands all the time, bands that I meet with, if the song's there, that's what's most important.
Yeah.
If the music is right, everything else will fall into place.
Dude. I think we freaking did it. Like I really do feel like we could talk forever, and like maybe we come back and come to a specific subject or a specific story.
It's funny thinking back now in my head. I'm just sitting here going like, I literally just skipped over so much. But yeah, like it's very hard to look back. It's hard to look back on 21 years
and
try to reflect and be like, yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's an impossible task. I am setting you up for such a hard task, but like I seriously, like I would be honored to come back to and talk about any other stories, any other eras, anything.
Yeah, dude, I would love to get you to talk to Rick DeVoe, because I think he's a very integral part, not just in the Blink thing, but just the like Southern California action sports, the way it was kind of married with music, action sports, punk rock kind of vibe.
Oh, dude, that and understanding.
Because that's literally how I kind of started. He was the one that was promoting shows, and that's how he came to. And just that kind of whole Hurley Warped Tour, like that. I mean, it was real. You know what I mean?
Dude.
So
I need to. I absolutely.
Plus, I just love hearing him tell Fletcher stories from Pennywise, because it's fucking crazy. So,
dude, oh my God, yes, it has to happen.
Never get old with that.
It has to happen. But seriously, like I think right now we leave it here at this bit, and then we can come back to any piece. But like, dude, this was So
No,
freaking
dude, yeah, because literally
crazy.
my friend, everybody's texting like, "Yo, are we going to get drinks?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, where's Chris?" I was like,
I got lost in it, man. Like I try so hard to keep it right at an hour, and maybe I'll like split this one into 2 episodes, but like I couldn't st like it was
yeah.
like I was just sitting there and I was like, "Well, go on. This is
You're
crazy."
like,
Like
what?
yeah, I seriously,
You
like
know?
the and what a fucking honor to do your first podcast too. How no one has asked you to share these
Dude,
stories and
thank
how that
you.
has not happened, I don't know.